reading her piece entitled On the Train. And this piece is the capital of her biography, Woman of Rivers. The ride on the train from Kosti, known as the steamer, marked the start of the summer vacation as soon as it began. I felt a mixture of sadness and joy. Joy that I would be traveling on the westbound train again, and sadness at leaving my hometown, which rang with daytime noises and singing the fishermen on the river. I sobbed when I thought I would never return to the town's imprints. Had my young heart already surmised that my departure would take me to a faraway country, much farther than my child's mind would grasp. With my grandmother as my traveling companion, I started to discover the story of my family, the countryside, and the town where her sisters and the rest of her family lived. I never could sleep a wink the night before. I just counted the minutes, the seconds, and the dozen of questions teemed in my mind. When would the train come? When would we go to the station? When would it leave? Would it already be crowded as usual? Grandmother would gently argue me to shut up and stop talking for a while. Hours passed, and the sun sank again, and as it was about to set, the taxi taking us to the station chugged along to the rhythm of Faraway. At the station, the passengers say, "The train is late!" One memorable journey began with the definitive news that there had been plenty of rain in the west of the country, and all was well there. I heard my grandmother talking with other women laden with Sudanese foodstuff such as dried okra powder, wikab, and fermented mullet. In her other hand, she held two bottles, one filled to the brim with butterfat and the other with karkar oil. Not far off, I caught sight of someone resting his head on his arm, an elderly pilgrim woman who had turned her blue cotton gown into a pillow under her tired head while she awaited of deliverance. The station was busy with passengers and people seeing them off, friendly people sharing snacks and bored beans and making space for each other on the benches. One young man moved aside to make way for my grandmother, who then launched into saying prayers for them. May God grant you good health and give us a son like you in every town, she said. As one man snored, the local locomotives came and went, huffing and puffing under the shady neem trees. People told stories, laughing and whispering to each other. At last, the boarding whistle interrupted their rest and pulled them off their seats. I yawned, my eyes struggling to shake off my downness. The train was as crowded as usual. Falata there girls were singing a melody, turned to the sound of them munching away to falafel and other snacks. I always wondered why they didn't go to school. To the rhythm of the crowd, our people began arguing, complaining, and making peace with each other. For God's sake, calm down, folks. Hey boy, you trod on my toe and it stung like a scorpion. Sorry, lady, I can see you. There is no light in that carriage. Everyone raced to grab a place to rest their bodies, tired of their long waiting, impatient to see their families. Then the wheels of the train started to turn, groaning like a malcontent railway worker, while the houses along the track remained generously wide open. Houses large enough for those departing and those arriving, full of hospitality and the delicious smell of food when your stomach is countered by hunger. Pancakes with milk tea and beans, everything that was available. Given generously, these people were kind to you. One woman's face caught my attention. She hugged me and hot tear ran down the furrow in her cheek. As I put out my little hand in furrow, as if she had known me from birth, as if I had been born in her lap, how warm her embrace was. The argument died down, the loud voices subsided, and storytelling began. Two old men started talking about the Jowda warehouse incident, reminding me of stories about my grandfather, who worked as a policeman and lost the sight of his right eye at the time. His partial blindness testimony to a history that still saddens me and makes me cry. The town of Jowda is in a farming district close to a history that farming district too close to coasting. My grandfather's eyes would tear up when he told his story, even the one that was lightless, but this was before I read about the historic outrage in the warehouse, where people were suffocated to this, but people were suffocated to this when their only crime was to assemble and demand their just right from the first national government. After independence in February 1959, the authorities locked up those assembled in a Besticade's warehouse that was about 20 meters square without water, ventilation, or toilets. 198 of them died of suffocation, so that the stars of liberation and development. When my political awareness started to take shape, but before it exploded, I understood the extent of the tragedy. I used to resent the poem by Sudanese poet Salah Ahmed Ibrahim, 20,000 humans. If they had been a bunch of wilderness, counted to be sold to the urban servant in the big city. The midday sun wouldn't have scorched their sun. There were 20,000 humans dying of exhaustion, suffocating to death. The core of my political awareness seemed to blossom on this train. The two old men went on telling stories about the Jowda warehouse, their deep grief evidence in the wrinkles that the years had left on their faces. Two women sat beside opposite me, one of them carrying her baby. They were talking in whispers. The face of one woman would tense up, and the face of the other woman would relax. And my own little face would follow suit in concert with the drama of their animated conversation. One of them pointed towards the back of the train, the source of a strong fragrance. It was the smell of sandalwood from a young bride. Her oiled face glowed, and she looked tired and apprehensive. Her husband, who had bride henna on his hand, swore to divorce his bride irrevocably if the old woman opposite them refused to take a chicken thick, especially prepared for the newlyweds. At the window, a girl a few years older than me held a notebook and told me later that she was doing her homework, writing. That what matters to me at the time was the grown-ups would leave us to play as we wanted. Still, it would have been impossible to sleep even if the train wheels had made less noise, because the famous mosquitoes haven't given up the habit of droning. The train crawled along past Mount Moya, Mount Dawood, Sinar Junction, and Sinar Town and stopped a long time in Wad Al Haddad station. Because there is some problem at Al Hajj Abdullah, some of the passengers lived in at the night with farewell tear and expression of kindness. Between their tears, they wrote down their addresses and exchanged them. Because I was still watching a young woman who had taken a fancy to a 20 years old man. Her heart melted, her blood ran hot, and she hid her tears, stumbling as she left through the train door. Oh, if he had, if he were the knight of her dream, gazing with desire into her sparkling eyes. He slipped a small piece of paper into her hand, a first talisman of love. Now I know why her cheeks were so flushed. The train pulled its load patiently and faithfully. It did not flatter, not flag. It gave the girl a warmth like the sound of shepherd's flutes. An avuncular ticket collector arrived stern looking and swearing that if someone didn't pay the fare difference, they would have to leave the train at the next station. A man in his 15 argued his case, explaining his difficult situation. The ticket collector, stern face, relaxed. He asked whose the man's family was, and when he heard the answer, I launched into a speech about Naila. Oh my, he said, I have many dear friends in Naila. The Abd Rasul family, they're originally from Al Jannah, but they moved last Ramadan to Niala. Imagine how surprised I was now by this friendliness on the part of the ticket collector, who had at first been glowing when all the passengers had left the train. His eyes teared up, so he was reluctant to cry openly. Passengers shared bread and stories. From them, men and women, I learned the gentle rhythm of farewell when warm tears flowed, shortening the distance between the city of Abayad and the town of Sinar Junction. By the company of lovely people, I'll never forget how. Once the train stopped for 2 days, and we heard that because of the rain, our journey couldn't resume until they repaired the rails and railroad ties swept off by the rain. There were so many passengers on the train, it was drowning. Some of them tried to create dry spaces under the trees that grew around the station. They lit fire and the place smelled of food and coffee. I'll never forget the scene when a group of people from the nearest neighborhood came to the station and swore by God and by everyone that was dear to them that the passenger must come home with them. We were shared out between the houses that I hold in my heart like beads of amulets, called the Sudanese people. The local people made room for us in their homes. They brought water for us to bathe and carpets to pray on. Their food was prepared and everyone competed to do their duties as generous hosts. For 2 days we stayed in their home in Sinar Junction and my memory retains many stories from our stay, especially the farewell scene when the conductor announced that the train would continue its chunking. All the household came out with their histories as if we had been living there since the old time. I saw some passengers exchanging the spices, dry beans, nuts, hibiscus, tea, and mangoes. They even brought with them to give to their families at their destination. One girl, a little older than me, gave me a necklace that with three seashells strung on the dark red thread. The image of her endured in my mind. A girl with beautiful eyes and sweet nature. The local people didn't go to their houses until the train had departed, with heads at the windows and hands waving goodbyes, tears glistening as they poured liberally from ear eyes, blurred as the last coach on the train moved off, going in the direction of departure. This scene often happened. It happened in Al Hajj Abdullah and in Wad al Haddad, in many villages where the locomotive broke down. It even happened in Mount Moya, and there were few houses scattered on the mountain, so far from the railway lines that it's not an effort to reach them. But the people in those houses came despite the rain. They brought water and milk and whatever a bounteous millet harvest and their rustic way of life provided. The journeys offered lessons and moments of wisdom, compelling stories and others that shaped my aversion to wars. Once, when I was 8, I was coming back from a vacation with my grandmother. I remember that it was Friday afternoon, and the train had stopped in the middle of the bridge between Kosti and Ribak. The sound of rocket fire was deafening, and my grandmother buried my head in her arm and prayed to God to protect us from a fairy death. We heard them saying that there was a war in the town of Abba Island, which lies in the White Nile of Costa. It was the first time I had heard artillery. Smoke rubbered against the window panes, and the lights in the train were turned off. And between the darkness and of the night and the river, a question that still nags me exploded like mine. Why war? I sometimes hear my father talking to our neighborhood about the war in southern Sudan. The idea of war terrified me. The mere idea, I never imagined how war could be uniquely ugly and how people were still able to kill. For many hours, we could hear the rattle of bullets. I would hear people reciting nervously the Shahada, the testament of faith. One person on top of the other, I would bear witness that there is no God but God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the prophet of God. But I didn't know this meant that they were preparing for this. Sometimes the rumble of the artillery would stop for some minutes, only for fear to then continue. Once it went on forever, I heard my grandmother reciting the Shahada and arguing me to repeat it with her. Among the voices, I could hear an invocation to all the names of God and all the righteous holy men that they might save us from a fiery death or drowning in the river below. We stayed there till midnight when the train was allowed to travel onto the town. The traces of smoke lasted for days, looming in the sky above Kosti from a distance. The sounds of bullets was nightmare that put fear into the hearts of the townspeople. We heard them saying that a shell had exploded in a Marby area near the river, and that some of the families had abandoned their houses, which, like their lives, were threatened with annihilation. Nightmares started to impose my childhood. The greatest arc that chased me in my dreams was an ugly image of houses destroyed, bodies burned to cinder, and souls hovering around the moon, asking what the secret of war might be. The moon is only light that cannot be effaced or disconcerted by war, by the smoke of fires or ruined places Moonlight has always reassured me that peace will triumph. Triumph. Purchase issue 19 here. Ishraga Mustafa is a writer, journalist, translator, and researcher. She was born in the town of Kosti in Sudan and studied journalism. She has a master's degree in journalism and doctorate in science from the University of Vienna. She now lives in Austria, where she is an activist, especially in defending the rights of migrants, and she chairs the library committee of the Arab Australian House for Culture and Arts. Her work has been published extensively in Arab and German. Jonathan Brett studied Arabic, Turkish, and Islamic history at St. John's College, Oxford University. Between 1918 and 2009, he worked for the Reuters news agency, mainly in the Middle East. He began library translation in 2008 and has since translated about a dozen novels as well as a collection of short stories, essays, and poetries. He won the Saif Kobash Manipal prizes for Arabic literary translation twice. For the Mamboos Talk by Kuwaiti writer Saud al-Sauni al-Sanausi, Saud al-Sanausi, and Azazil by Egyptian writer Yusuf Zerdan, as well as the Independence Foreign Fiction Prize in 2014 for his translation of the Iraq Christ by Hassan Blasim. His latest literary translation, including jokes for the German short stories by Mazen Maruf and Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Saoudi, which was shortlisted for the Man Booker and International Prize in 2008. Again, my name is Ula Saeed. I am Dr. Ishraga Mustafa Nies, and thank you for listening to my this.